Is anyone really surprised that the CIA trains killers? Or, for example, what? What? Someone came up with the interesting idea to bring the experience they had abroad back home in order to solve our domestic problems now. Actually, only one thing is surprising. It's surprising that the country turned out to be capable of correcting its own mistakes. Well, let's talk in more detail. Yesterday, we talked about Thomas Kruks. Well, that's the one who attempted to assassinate Trump and who, in a very short period, went from being a pro-Trump supporter to a rabid hater who wished for the president's death. I also asked how this could even happen, and today I got an answer. A possible answer to this question: how can you incredibly quickly and completely change a person's worldview and turn their emotions in the exact opposite direction? Here's the version of Congressman Tom Berga. Yes, I think that's right. That's what he said on the show with Benny Johnson.
But I think it happened, and why it happened was pretty easy to understand. The CIA has a program that they claimed they didn't have, but then they were sued and admitted it. Oh, actually, we did have this program, but we don't use it anymore, which I think isn't true. But,
You didn't believe them before? Why? Why the hell should I believe them now? And what did it do? It programmed people, kind of like brainwashing.
Normal human skepticism and experience dealing with liars. So, the CIA had and still has, I think, a mind control program continued. Naturally, there are people who are harder to influence, and there are people who are more easily influenced or brainwashed. I don't know, hypnotized. I don't know what it is. Yes, and the CIA knows what types of people they need to work with, and they look for them, naturally. That explains why Kruks' statements on the internet didn't lead to his arrest.
his unfulfilled, explosive, nervous psyche caught someone's interest somewhere. I met with a voter and they said, "Oh, are you going to deprive my child of medical care?" I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "You won't let them have gender reassignment surgery." And I said, well, I don't want taxpayers to pay for that. I said, "Yeah, and you're probably wondering where this is going." And I said, may I ask, how was your child diagnosed as well, transgender? And they said, "Oh, they diagnosed themselves." And I said, "Really, how did they manage to do that?" They said that some group contacted them through the internet. And I thought, well, that brings us back to what you were talking about. You have a child who has access to weapons or basic knowledge about them. He was programmed. You're absolutely right. They programmed this child. And Christie, Noam Cash, and Bangina and the others are reporting the facts as they know them. The facts were either buried or burned. Or those who knew are either sitting somewhere on a beach enjoying a fruity drink, or they're dead. I would guess they're probably dead. And here's what happens. You claim that this doesn't happen. They call me and you conspiracy theorists. But that's exactly what we're seeing, and it's happening in Washington. It's happening right now. It's too deep. And that's why I said I wish they could just come in and fire everyone and then start over.
It's not possible to fully disband all security agencies, but it would be the right thing to do, of course. But I'm afraid that after a relatively short period of time, the newly recruited ones will restore everything again, because people are people, and it will grow into a monster again. What to do? What should we do? I would be happy if I had a plan or an idea, but unfortunately I don't. In the meantime, to find and punish those who are already doing what we're talking about just to scare off potential manipulators.
But you can't do that because of security. You'll fire good people who are obviously keeping an eye on the terrorists or something like that. And that's where we are. That's why Cashbot or Bongiorno are struggling. I'm not Christy Noy. I'm not. Anyway, I don't care, but I think that's what happened at their level, and I don't care. You can call me crazy, but when the CIA says we don't have it, and then they're called to court and they say, well, we have it, but we don't use it anymore. Obviously, someone is using it. They know how to contact these people. If you look at Muslim radicals and how they recruited them, you remember they had one. There was an American Taliban or whatever, that guy who was caught. And no one talks about it anymore. No one even remembers it. I think his parents were Americans. They went to a Greek church or something like that. That guy was programmed. And, you're right. They cleaned up the crime scene. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, brother. If there's a murder here, our sheriff's department blocks off the place. They cover it with a tarp and they will clean it up. No one can get in there. No one can contaminate the crime scene. That's the Knox County Sheriff's Department and the Knoxville City Police. And I guarantee you the Blount County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Baroni. These people always secure the crime scene. It's by the book. And one more thing, I sponsored legislation regarding cremation. So I know a little about when, they bring in the body. There are probably laws in this state that they broke because they cremated that child. I think pretty quickly, if I'm not mistaken, you could. Oh, yeah, 11 days. Yeah, okay. And if there was an investigation, there's probably something in the law that says you can't dispose of the body. And I think you're right. I think all of this was covered up. It was planned, and we just got lucky. I'm very close and connected with a Navy sniper, and I called him after that. I said, what do you think? He answered, Tim, I could have made that shot with open sights, without optics or any of that. We just got damn lucky.
We just won the lottery ticket that Trump stayed alive. The policeman who started climbing onto the roof scared Krups. Or maybe Krups himself got nervous while shooting. Well, it's actually hard to miss from 100 meters with a good sighted-in rifle. And I'm telling you this as someone who shot pretty well, even without optics, from an M16, which isn't really meant for that kind of shooting. And at 100 meters out of 10 shots, I probably would have hit the center of the target with at least 8 of them. Well, not a perfect score, but definitely 8 for sure. And it would have taken me just a few seconds, pretty fast. We got lucky, to be continued. But Crooks was prepared both psychologically and technically, led step by step, to the assassination of the President of the United States. And
if Trump hadn't turned his head slightly, it all would have ended.
1/4 of an inch is half a centimeter. And there wouldn't have been the best president we could ever dream of. Half a centimeter. And they would have ruined America as we know it, with its American dream, with its great experiment of individualism. Which means that Tonka Tonka is the barrier between the great rise and the great fall. Centimeter?
We shouldn't rely on the miracles of Dea, our Lord and Savior, who moves the bullet through time and space. Or, just 1 more centimeter and Trump is dead, and he's dead live in front of the whole world. In the message, which I believe he's a congressman, and they wanted to send it. So
that was a message. And they were sending it clearly. And they always use a front man. And that's what they had in this couple. They knew he would be shot. Apparently, yes, and of course he would be shot. And you're right, they bring refrigerators. What the hell could they have? I mean, just a homemade bomb with nails. The mafia uses things like that. You could wipe out 20 people in this area. You could be in the front row with a cooler or a charge in your bag, or come in like a suicide bomber with something. And they had looked like a group of pygmies guarding the president. I mean, come on, it was a perfect storm, and they missed it, and then they almost missed it again. But on that golf course, it just doesn't make sense. You have these people, and they activate them. It's like when they launch these companies with this dark money. They run 20 across the country for Congress, and then they find 2 or 3 good ones. And these are their puppets. And they get them, and that's what they do with these kids. They program them exactly the same way.
Honestly, I'm sure that's how it happens. And I'm sure I was before, and I'm sure now. And I think there are departments, groups, all sorts of divisions inside the vast CIA and FBI, which are created as autonomous and operate without such close supervision and, for the most part, even information about them, to the country's political leadership. And they decide for themselves what is better or worse for us, for America, from their point of view.
So you're claiming that Thomas Crooks was trained by some dark intelligence program, MK Ultra or another, to commit an act of murder that day?
That's what I think. I've always said so. There are very few people on the list who could do as much damage to them as Trump. Trump is right. They're not after him, but us. He's just blocking them.
That is, within the law enforcement agencies, departments, and the political class, I'm sure there are autonomous groups with a certain ideology, goals that may not align with our goals and desires. Their goals may be globalist, or I don't know, the creation of two castes of people on the planet, the people and the servants of the people, where, of course, they are the servants. Or maybe they just want a concentration camp, digital or not, I don't care what it's called. But they mean themselves as overseers, or maybe they're idealists or something else. But they sit in the shadows and try to pull the HGB strings, but sometimes it doesn't work out for them.
Obviously, there should be solid answers to this, which can be obtained.
The elements have been destroyed. You'll never know that. It's like with Kennedy. We're only now learning something about Kennedy through the hearings. And guess what? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It was supposed to be a hearing about Kennedy, the one we had, which helped organize. The LONA representative, you know, she's doing her damn research, dude. And I was asking tough questions. I asked the doctor, and he said yes. Those were definitely two different factors, weekends and weekend injuries. It didn't even make the news, and here's what's going to happen with that. That's it, that's all. You'll never get any answers.
Did you hear what he said? Yes. Kennedy. 2 bullets entered from different sides and 2 exits. It's clear to everyone who watched the silence of the press, the silence of everyone except Robert Kennedy. Well, the younger one, of course, the nephew of the assassinated president and the son of the assassinated presidential candidate, and, by the way, Congresswoman Lona. And, in my opinion, no one else in the government is interested in this.
You know, Reagan talked about how you can lose it in a single generation. We could lose it in just a few days. You know, Vac, I remember my father, an old World War II Marine, when the elections were going badly. One night he said, buddy, let me say a prayer. And I looked at him and said, wow, damn. A United States Marine fought in the Pacific during World War II, facing the toughest battles at Okinawa. He saw terrible things. His heart was broken. And he said this simple prayer. He prayed, Lord, don't let us lose our country. Amen. And I thought, you know, I remembered that in my mind, and it still brings tears to my eyes. Because that's exactly where we are right now, because this country is lazy. We're sitting on our butts and letting them take our country away. And I'm not talking about an armed uprising by a group of conservatives, like they always say. I'm talking about getting your ass to the damn polling stations, going to church, standing up for what's right in this damn country. Stop letting these cowardly preachers just stop preaching the gospel. Hold them accountable. Hold your friends accountable when they criticize this country. You walk by claiming you're too busy. Make time to handle it. That's why I go on cable news network, even though some in our party dislike it. I appear on channels others avoid and argue with them. If someone yells at me on the street corner, hell, I'll go up to them. We have to take our country back. Benny, sorry for ranting. Sorry for getting excited. You're doing great. I like your street
videos. I love your street videos. I like the jokes about the guy's mom's basement. and he's Hot Pockets, and
Made him famous, but now he hates it.
pizza, rolls, sure. People say, Burchett, you're crazy. And how dare Benny give a platform to such a madman, not realizing that the current Health and Human Services Secretary believes that Sirhan, who killed his father, was part of this program. He says it just like that. And Emma, he believes it was a huge conspiracy and that it was clearly someone under mind control. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will just tell you that directly, and he's the Health and Human Services Secretary. They forget that we are. What we learned about the kidnapping of Gretchen Wayne, where I believe about 8 out of 12 of the kidnappers were federal agents or informants who were there for a psychological operation on the other 4. The fools who were there, not realizing that all their little meetings were organized by the federal government to kind of plant the seed for a violent kidnapping. That's what the FBI was actively doing. And there's a list as long as my arm of congressmen of how the FBI encouraged and or allowed political violence and incited it in this country. And that seems like the greatest evil.
I'm absolutely happy that there are people in the United States and there are forces that resist, that fight, that aren't afraid to stand in the way of those who want to turn us into hoofed slavery. And that we have a system of governance structured so that this cleansing can be done not only through revolution, bloody takeovers, or civil wars. These are the results of great documents. One is called the Declaration, and the other is called the Constitution, which of course should be updated, taking into account the identified mistakes. Yes, but it can't be done today, because if we make amendments, we'll only make things worse. Therefore, let's be happy that inside the country, within its structure and in the genome of its inhabitants, which is also very important, yes, the genome of its inhabitants, there is an opportunity to slow down and stop the processes of degeneration. The transformation of us with you into happy citizens of yet another paradise, maybe communist or whatever they decide to call it. Democratic, socialist, or something else. By the way, we'll soon see the results of the experiment in New York. So, a commie is trying to build communism in a single family, and I think they're talking about the Mamdani family. It'll be interesting because I get to watch from afar. For those inside, it won't be as interesting. Don't forget to subscribe and, of course, hit the bell. As I was told, this is good for promoting the channel. So, does that mean we can say it's your way of showing solidarity with us, those who prepare the content? About Mamdani, so...
In New York, the new mayor is Zohran Mamdani. A lot of people are afraid. He makes me nervous because I don't know what he's going to do. He was elected mostly by young Americans, especially single women, who believe that the government is the answer to their problems, not hard work, industry, and capitalism. He mostly won by saying he would give out free stuff. Well, now Keti Kukul, the governor, says we won't let him make many changes. We can stand shoulder to shoulder with him. When it comes to fighting Trump over immigration and customs enforcement and getting rid of illegal immigrants. But now it's being reported that he's there asking people for money to give away free stuff. So I'm starting to wonder, what do you think about this guy? They always say follow the money, but I'm just curious if in fact, the Democratic Party, which wants to control Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and everyone, and control everyone, this guy is now begging for money so he can give away free stuff. What do you think will happen to Zohran Mamdani?
Well, that would be a disaster. You'll have guys like me in law enforcement who will just say, I'm leaving, like literally. Calls are probably being made to local jurisdictions outside New York to protect pensions, and everyone will leave them. If firefighters and law enforcement leave, there will be mass chaos. You'll basically have an exodus of millionaires. People with money will leave because he's enforcing rent control. He's going to open a free grocery store, right? But I think the biggest story that nobody is talking about is how a 34-year-old man who has never worked and is a foreign citizen from, I think, Uganda, became the the mayor of New York. Well, that's because New York is flooded with legal and illegal immigrants, and they all have the opportunity to vote legally in New York, in the state of New York. So we're seeing what it looks like when we're being replaced. That's it. At first, I was angry at all the young white women who I believe are a cancer in the electoral system. But then I stepped back and said, okay, let's see how many illegal immigrants I know are physically within the walls of New York and can vote. How many legal immigrants under the quasi-parole system under Joe Biden? We are examining the effects of open borders and replacement. And what will we be replaced with? Well, we will be replaced. And I know this will be harsh to say and people will push back, but check the facts as much as you want. We are being replaced by peasants from third world countries who are illiterate in their own language, can't read or write in their own language, and don't understand our Constitution. What are they voting for and what do they know? We all vote for what we love and know. So what do they know? They know communism, they know socialism, they know free stuff. And since they are brought here under false pretenses or they cross the border illegally, they are completely dependent on the government for survival.
I played you this clip because it's Jay Carroll. He worked for many years at the border in agencies, then on the zoological side of illegal crossings. He was the person who actually discovered Biden's People scheme for bringing them in. 300,000 children were brought to the United States alone for prostitution and slave labor.
When you realize that they're not here to become Americans, they don't care about America. They just want to take from it. And when you take away free education, healthcare, food, and free housing, they'll deport themselves. Let me just give you a number. It's shocking, isn't it? So in 2024, the California legislator came forward and said, we spent $6 billion on healthcare for illegal immigrants between the ages of 17 and 49. Not even on little children and infants or the elderly, just a small part for me. Then they came back at the end of the legislative cycle and said, well, we had to recalculate the numbers. The woman, almost whispering at the podium, says, the real number is 9.7 billion for illegals in California. You and I were talking about this right before you came, the latest interview of Elon Musk with Joe Rogan. And Elon Musk says this is the only way that blue states like Illinois, New York, and California balance their budgets. That's what they push these fraudulent claims for medical reimbursements. And the federal government gives them tens of billions of dollars and they stay afloat. Take it away. We've spun that money from them. That's
what Trump is doing. One by one, he's taking money away from the Democratic states, which are being misused.
Why does socialism fail? It goes against human nature. We all want to be rewarded for our own efforts. We are unique individuals. We don't want to be like a tessera in one big mosaic. There's a well-known anecdote. I'm not sure if it's true. What? When Marx invited people and Engels to his living room to discuss the principles of socialism in the mid-19th century in Europe, he had the idea that he would bring out a tray of money and these poor intellectuals would come. And of course, as you remember from Capital, everyone would be rewarded according to their needs for their labor. And so he said, if you're poor, just take what you need. But do you know how that would work? People are the way they are. One person or two people or three people will take everything and say that their labor is needed more than someone else's, even if that's not true, since there will be no obstacles to dishonesty. As long as you cover up your selfishness with a broader ideological shell, and that's exactly what socialism does. It tries to say that we are all brothers and we all love each other, we all want the same thing. That's what Mamdani says, but look at Mamdani himself. He comes from one of the wealthier families in New York. His father is a tenured professor, very well paid, a committed Marxist, and a supporter of Hamas. His mother is a film director who has made millions of dollars. He grew up in affluence. He lives in a rent-controlled apartment, even though by any standard he can be considered a wealthy person and does not need government assistance. It would be better to give that apartment to someone with fewer means. So my point of view is that socialism destroys private initiative. If you think that the harder you work, the better ideas you come up with, the more efficiency you can create in your business or in your life. But you won't be rewarded more than someone who doesn't show these qualities or doesn't want to show them, or just says live and let others live. I just want to sit at home, watch television, and order pizza. And he will get just as much as you in terms of cars or housing or federal subsidies. It doesn't work. We have one last, more controversial piece of evidence that it doesn't work. Since the Obama era, the spread rate of socialist practices, policies, and agendas in the United States has rapidly accelerated. And after Obama's presidency, the rather esoteric political term red state, blue state became commonplace. And it basically refers to those states that are more socialist and those states that are more free market. California is a socialist state in the sense that we're talking about like New York with an income tax of over 13%. At the highest levels, we have the highest prices for gas and oil, natural gas and oil. We have the highest energy prices. We have some of the highest housing prices. It's the same in New York, the same in Minnesota, Michigan, in all these states. Why? Because the central government, first of all, persecutes the opposition, and most of these states are one-party states without a viable opposition to keep them in check. Secondly, the people who created this socialist system do not follow it themselves. If you look at California, that's Nancy Pelosi, Barbara Boxer, the late Dianne Feinstein, Jerry Brown, Gavin Newsom. They all have one thing in common. They were very, very wealthy. They lived a life completely different, separate from the masses who, as they said, would benefit from their socialist policies. And as a result, they turned a paradise like California into a purgatory. Victor
is talking about his experience. I confirm California is not a friendly place for those who want to start a business. Whether it's manufacturing, services, or a brokerage firm, and they also tell you whom to hire and whom not to. We have certain laws related to unions if you have a big business, and you can only buy insurance from those companies. They finance the election campaigns of our so-called demons and so on.
Thus, there is no empirical evidence either in the United States or abroad that there is a socialist remedy for what socialism has done. Mamdani actually took over New York under Bill de Blasio and previous mayors, which was a socialist paradigm and is now in a difficult situation, and he thinks that more socialism will fix it. One last observation: in the Western world we say that Europeans are more advanced. Some people think so naively. They were socialists, they had a value-added tax, they had higher inheritance and income taxes at one time than we did. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but they controlled every aspect of the economy. And of course, if you object to socialism or communism, and who wouldn't, the state then has to step in and restrict freedom of speech. What we're seeing in Europe today is a disastrous policy of bringing in poor, illegal immigrants with political, religious, cultural, and social views that are opposed to those of Europeans. And then it's assumed that if anyone complains, they're guilty of racism and suppressing freedom of speech. And in the meantime, the idea is that everyone will get an apartment in a high-rise, use public transportation, and become more or less the same. People are happy. At the moment, there are right-wing, if you can call them that, conservative free market governments in countries like Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Italy. And they are growing in places like Britain, the Netherlands, and Austria. In France, the opposition itself, which stands against socialism, is gaining strength and people are supporting it. Why? Because they don't know socialism? No, because they know it too well. And also,
The same can be said about us. We are against equalization because, unfortunately, we know it all too well.
or what is the modern world, the recent past and the present? Everywhere the social paradigm has been implemented, how has it been done to destroy the economy? And my people, for and to the people, their civil liberties. Soviet Union, class mouse, China, class. Cuba has been in free fall since the Castro brothers came to power in 1959. And it's the same as once a wealthy country in Latin America, class to less for Colombia. Whoever accepted it did not succeed. Socialism offers nothing.
So let's see what methods Mamdani and his fascists, who are also communists, Islamists, and Clobitists, will use to tighten the noose around New York's neck. But there's no doubt that they will try to tighten it. That's all. Goodbye.